All right, I'm going to share my screen here also. Let's see. I guess it's this one. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, welcome to the February 15th special meeting. This is about the information for the position of chair. Basically, we're going to go over some important dates and contacts, any questions or answers, a quick review of some good material that, the chair is going to have to keep on hand. And then any suggestions from you guys of anything that we think the chair might need as far as like continuity binders, things like that. Hold on, I'm trying to not allow, okay, here we go. So the first thing is oh, sorry. All right. Is there a way to minimize that? I can move it out of the way. Guess not. Sorry, I'm trying to get a nods meeting. Put that on the desktop real quick. And then I'll keep it there. All right. All right. So important context. I've been working with FIA on trying to, now these contacts specifically are the agencies and who we can start passing this information to and start educating the community, because these are pretty much civil servant that everybody should really have their information and a little bit of what they do and how they do things. Like I told Derek, today I contacted the city manager, and this was just kind of like a little quick list. Um, by no means is it perfect, and it probably should be a live document where they should keep just adding as much information to it as they can. But I think we've got a pretty good start on like, who does what in the counties. I removed a couple of ones that have bounced back emails, which I'm just assuming that they are no longer there. But is there any questions on that one? No? Sorry, I can't see hands. If anybody has their hands up, just yell at me, okay? Okay. All right. Sorry about this. I can't move this piece, and I kind of need to get here. No, that's not it. Wow. This is oh, there we go. I can move it to the bottom. All right. Important dates. And again, by no means is this perfect, but we do have in June, I found that it's probably the fastest and the best thing to start looking for a tax accountant to hire in June, because by the time our taxes get here, we've been having a very difficult time getting a tax attorney to continue working with us. A lot of tax attorneys don't prefer to work with nonprofits, but I believe if the hiring process, that's probably should be like #1 priority as soon as it comes in. This year, we still had a little bit of issues trying to find that tax accountant. Drea was able to negotiate for us someone who owed her a favor, so they're going to be our tax accountant for this year. And that I'm waiting for, I believe her name is Katie, to reach out to me because she did get our information 2 weeks ago, and we finally, she said she should be reaching out this week to me. October is a pretty important date. That's when the treasurer should really be looking inside our mailbox, making sure, because we start receiving that we need to update our information with the Secretary of State. Usually that would be our attorney who will contact the chair and just let them know, hey, is everything still the same? And our annual report is due in November. January is taxes again. That's when 1099 for contractors need to go out, and then taxes for the prior year. In March is our insurances due in March. So that might be something that I've been wanting to get with Andrew to get these dates kind of put on the calendar for the chair. But if that does not get accomplished before this next election, this will be available for them to kind of take a look at. And then, of course, April elections. Any questions there?
Aren't these standard duties of the treasurer, Delenia, and all these notifications, they come into the WCC's mailbox as notifications from the state, so it's all pretty straight up.
It is pretty straight up, but it should be something that the chair is aware of also. It's been a little bit hectic as far as, like I said, finding the tax accountant and hiring a tax accountant. It was probably our biggest problems for the last 2 years.
Okay, a little question on that is that, because the WCC is a nonprofit, what are the annual proceeds of the WCC? Say, are they over 200K a year? Are they under 50K a year? Because that determines which 1099 you need to file. And it's usually pretty easy and straight up because there are no taxes.
Those are 1099 for the contractors. Like last year, we contracted all of the artists, including Doriandra and Drea. So those are the taxes that I was.
Who normally
the
prepares the
1099s that I was actually paying. The 1099s would be prepared by the bookkeeper, because that's where they're posted in QuickBooks, and
Okay,
then
would
she
that
could
be
just
Drea?
send them directly. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Has she been actually performing her duties adequately? I heard there was some difficulty with checks recently and some
Yeah.
odd business during the year. Do you feel comfortable and confident in her services?
I do. There's a difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant. We hired her for bookkeeping. She's put a lot of man hours. Bookkeeping is, here's what we need, and she writes the checks, she closes the books, she gives back a report to the treasurer, and then that treasurer is supposed to go over it with the rest of us. I can honestly say I haven't seen that. But it should get a little bit smoother. She's also, like, when it comes to the portion of the payroll, which these checks are being considered more of a payroll type of thing, that is usually more of an expense, like another expense. Again, she was doing that free of charge. That's why it's really important that we kind of keep them in their guidelines of their contracts, as far as that's concerned. So realistically, yes, it is up to the treasurer for the majority of these things, but it's definitely something that the chair should be aware of, and so they can ask questions. Hey, have these things been done? If you're talking, Dennis, I can't hear you. Did you say something? Okay. Anybody have any other questions? Great. So let's see. On to some quick materials. There's been a lot of discussion that has been done at the board level. It's really super important for the chair to really know this charter backwards and forwards. Remember, we are supposed to be educating our community. I know this year there was a lot of stump on that. The difference between the community council is that, because I've heard a couple of comments from some board members that, oh, the only reason that you can, the whole reason to qualify as a vote is just to vote in the elections. And that seems to be a large misconception. The majority of business needs to be done at the general meeting level because it is a community decision, not a board decision, especially that the funds are expenditures are at like 200. Like if it's more than $200, it has to go to the community council, which would include people like Jane and Stephen and anybody who qualifies with that one meeting. And I kind of feel like that's been, except for once the community council, if we get a grant, that's a little bit different because the grant, then that's where expenditures are shown to the community council, and then they say yes, and then we move forward. And then it doesn't have to go to that level again. Go ahead, Dennis.
Could I make a comment there? As the former treasurer for many years, the way it has always worked in the past historically is that, the charter says that the limit for expenditures without a general membership approval is $200. But we have always considered that to be expenditures from the general fund in quotes. And so we have multiple accounts.
Correct.
So we have one that is actually called general fund. And then we have others that are called other things. And so all of the grants, of course, go into their own separate accounts. And because they're grants and they're not expenditures from that general fund, then those don't require any approval of the membership, of course, and that's the way it should be. So my strategy for getting around the limitations of the charter, which is a $200 limit, is that provided the money that's being spent is not coming out of the general fund, in quotes, that account, then it doesn't require an approval of the membership. But actually the membership is very giving and forgiving, and if we need to spend $1,000 out of the general fund for a really specific and really good reason, they always vote in favor of that. So this has rarely actually been an impediment to us, the $200.
I agree. Usually they are pretty open to, especially if it's a really good idea of what they're doing. This is because once we start, making proceeds from the grants, those proceeds will be moved into the general fund because it's considered community funds at that point. But the grants themselves and those budgets, once the budget is passed, that's it. It can stay at either the level of board, or as we did with this particular one, we brought it down to the level of a committee because we knew the elections were going to kind of get sticky, and maybe just keep it at that one level and then bring it up the other way. And then education. This year, I kind of tried to focus a little bit more on the portion that is, I was trying to help create the foundation. Derek, thank you so much for stepping in with the bane of my existence, which was that website. And no hate towards Joe and them at all. Honestly, there was a lot of miscommunication. I think next year it should be a little bit easier. And I would suggest to maybe get as many of the, I try to get as many of the paid subscriptions on one spreadsheet. But I'm not sure if I sent that to you. But that might be something that needs to be put on there too, so we could just have a spreadsheet of everything. Because now I'm starting to see things from like MailChimp and expenditures that I personally was not aware of. Does that make sense? Like they're the subscriptions, it should be for the subscriptions that we have, basically. Anything else on the charter that I wanted to go over? Affiliated groups, just kind of like a quick heads up. I did have an artist, I think it was a coalition, not quite sure, but they were looking for fiscal sponsorship, which was really exciting to hear. They definitely want to come in and talk to the Whitaker Community Council. I kind of gave them our situation. There's only going to be the March meeting that's going to be focused on the elections and then the election. So if they could reach back out in June or early April to maybe get on the agenda for the Whitaker Community Council. This year we re-signed our contract with Sunday Whitaker Market, and they have been getting a couple of grants and things like that when it comes to fiscal sponsorship. They basically get to use our nonprofit number, and then we give them some information where they can then give us their money, and then we take 5% of that and then cut their checks. Right now we have the Whitaker Community Market, and then also we just signed, as you guys know, this year, the Emerald Tread Collective. The Emerald Tread Collective about a week ago just finished their contracts and sent them out to me. And I let them know that I'm waiting for the tax attorney, but that once that happens, then I'll get them with, I guess, the next chair so they could start their process too. Board of directors, officers, just to answer a quick question. Yes, Anand, it would have been really awesome if there was 2 of us signing checks. It might have made life a little bit easier, and hopefully next year, the chair and the vice chair can share in those particular items. This year, I found it impossible, basically, to find the time that not only was right for me, but for the bookkeeper, and not having anybody else being able to schedule was pretty tough. I know that next year might be just a little bit better. The other piece of that is, one thing I learned last year was about the credit cards, like I stated. Never ever close the credit card. You wait and you transfer the credit card. And then this way, none of our subscriptions or anything like that is gonna, go to the wayside. I did talk to Cameron at the bank, and he's ready to rock and roll as soon as we are. As far as the Zoom meetings are concerned, I can tell you this is not a one-man job. I found it, and I don't know if it was impossible for me because of my disabilities or, but definitely a facilitator and a moderator is a key for running the meetings correctly. I can tell you that I definitely didn't know the Robert rules and probably stopped people when I should have said point of order a few times, but it was very difficult for me to keep it all in order. Let's see, elections, board committees, I think. So yeah, basically with the charter, this is your guidelines. Go back to it because every board member says they know the charter inside and out, and usually I find that that is not the case. Let's see. And then the next material. Okay. So one thing that I found really interesting and that was kind of awesome was that we actually got to record our attorney, which I'm gonna have the clip. Oh, hopefully it's not gonna play. Don't play. Of our attorney going over not only fiscal sponsorship, but basically everything that you need to know about the nonprofit side of it. With that being said, she did answer quite a few questions. Maybe there are a few things that were left out of the material, but if I would always refer back to this and then contact the attorney because it's a heck of a lot cheaper. So that's probably the only thing that I really needed on that end. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Right. The
Anand?
financial workflow.
I think
Oh,
Anand had a
Anand, go
question.
ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you could possibly put the web address for that video in the chat for us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Let me just copy it. Now let's see if I can get to my chat. Okay, here we go. Did I do it? Okay, awesome. The financial workflow. Let me move this out of the way. Put this back up here. So basically, the WCC votes on all expenditures. The way the flow is supposed to work is it goes to once it's voted and approved, it goes to the treasurer, who then sends a report to the bookkeeper, who puts it in QuickBooks and creates any checks that we need. And once the bookkeeper closes all the books, they send a report back to the treasurer, or realistically, the treasurer has access to QuickBooks. So the treasurer can just pull once a month their expenditure reports and send them out. As far as which report, profit and loss, I believe there's quite a few of them. So it's something that the board altogether should maybe take a look at and see what the community should know in comparison to like some of the information that should be kept at a board level, if that makes sense. And then after they pull the reports, the treasurer verifies the information, and then any checks that need to be signed go to the chair or the vice chair. Is there any question on that? All right. The permissions for the workflow. So this was not only brought to our attorney, but also brought to the attention of our banker, that now we have like somebody who services our account, which is Cameron right now. And the way the permissions works is a level of security. So even though it's a little bit boggling, it also kind of secures that there's not one hand to the other. So the chair and the vice chair, they have accounting signing privileges only. So they don't have access to the checks. They don't have access to online or QuickBooks. The treasurer is the person who has access and privileges to transfer money. The treasurer has access to move the money back and forth between accounts. And they also have privileges as far as QuickBook access to the reports only. The bookkeeper has access to do pretty much the same thing, move from one account to the other. A good example of that would be that the majority of the money is kept in a restricted fund for the grants. When we go to use the grants, only that money that was budgeted out goes to the general account, and then they are sent out from the general account. Any questions on that? And then board of directors, of course, no access to QuickBooks or accounts. Go ahead, Dennis.
I have a question. So
Sure.
the WCC now has debit cards, I believe. Is that right?
No, credit cards, no debit cards.
Okay.
During Ian's, we tried credit cards at first, but it became really cumbersome for him to have to run out and get things. So we changed it to credit cards instead.
Okay, I think,
Yeah.
debit cards are far easier in my opinion, and I run a business. So anyway, who has access to the cards?
To the credit card? That's the next step.
Oh,
So with the business credit cards, the chair has a credit card and so does the vice chair. With those, we have no access to the PO box. So if I was out there shopping for Gucci bags, the treasurer is the only person who can get in there and would see the bank's, the statements and say, Delaney is buying Gucci bags with, the credit cards. The bookkeeper has no access to the credit cards or to the PO box. And of course, the board of directors don't have it. And Dennis, I don't know if you heard, but we learned a little lesson last year because Ian closed the credit card and Cameron had told us, no, you don't close the credit card, you just transfer, primaries to primaries.
sure.
So, yeah.
One
So
just
this
point of-
year,
No, I'm just curious. It looks to me like only the treasurer has access to the PO box.
correct.
How about the
Yeah.
secretary?
No.
Okay.
Well, no, we only have one key.
Oh. Thought we had two keys. We must have lost one.
They must have lost one before our time.
We
but,
lost one for a while and then we found it and then we had two keys.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only person who right now has access to it is only and then I believe during Angie's reign, we found that the secretary really didn't have a lot to do with going into the mailbox. So since we didn't, we lost the key there. I say we, but the key was lost, so might as well just have one person. Any questions there? And then there really shouldn't be at this point any board reimbursements for anything. I found this to be that it really should, even though there is no reimbursements, there are some reimbursements that still need to be made that weren't paid from before this was created, if that makes sense. But with the credit cards and the checkings accounts, there really shouldn't be a need for it unless it's, voted on completely. And then, let's see, any questions on that? No? Right, and then any suggestions you guys might have that I can add into this beautiful continuity binder that I'm going to create for the next chair. A lot of these things, I've made it kind of like real simple on one paper so far that you can just, that's going to live kind of in the shared drive, and that they can just click on it and should take them right to these pages, so they can just have like really quick access. Because now that I can do it with my eyes closed, but before it was like, okay, I got to go find this again. Go ahead, Dennis.
One comment about access, and it is that I think you've done a very good job of organizing this in such a way that it's clear, it's foolproof, and everyone has a very well-defined duties. And so I think it's a functional system, and that's great. But I think one thing that we need to provide access to all board members is access to the records archive. There is a substantial records archive, and every board member is entitled to access to that archive. So we need to create some way of just simply giving everyone access to it de facto once they are a board member.
Yeah, that's something that was really on our plate as far as the exec board to try to get that resolved. And I don't know if you got access to it, but it was insane to try to find information in there. So hopefully the next board will be able to get like what I would suggest, because I worked in IT, was to create a filing system in a way like a naming convention, and stick with that naming convention all the way through. Because I can't tell you how many times I was looking for a contract and it led me down a dirty little path of somewhere completely different. And a lot of time was spent just searching. I truly believe that we need a librarian.
I have a great
As
suggestion.
far as like, go ahead.
I'm thinking that I believe that the organization just got 25K as a grant that can be used for admin. So I'm thinking that it's a perfect use of this to hire someone as a librarian, so to speak, short term, but to have them go in and organize that entire records trove, just as you describe it, with naming conventions that make sense, and with a legend that everyone can read. Oh, I need access to that. Okay, this is how I find it. So it's just like
Yes.
a library, and what if we spent 5K on that? It would be super well worth it. So just a
Yeah,
suggestion of something we can do with that extra money.
I definitely agree. One of the things that, and Ian did as best as he could to hand off, but there was a lot of information. And like I said, Doriandra did help, try to dwindle down. And we were so focused on trying to get the grant stuff done that these were little things that just kept, okay, that's not as important, and that's not as important. The one thing that I can say is that the secretary and the chair, and this is something that maybe the vice chair, but you guys definitely want to talk about, is that we also have a pretty much a legend for username and passwords to like certain like there's DocuSign and the Facebook page and things like that, as far as and then the Zoom. I think that for me, I think everybody should be able to use the Zoom so they could do special meetings when they want to. But I guess that's going to be for the next board. So I did offer to both the treasurer and the chair, excuse me, the treasurer and the secretary, if they maybe wanted to come in on this meeting and ask some, add some more information about the treasurer's position and the secretary's position, but they also declined. And I can tell you that I know Andrew was boggled down with trying to figure out reports for the grants, but I have not heard much from him. So that's pretty much all I have. Is there any other suggestions?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for putting this together, because that's always something that seems to be missing, is passing on information that is clear, gives you good direction. And so I appreciate the effort.
Thank you. It's also a little selfish because I don't want, no, I was gonna say, I don't want them calling me afterwards. No, no, it's completely fine to keep in touch with me afterwards. I believe that there's gonna be, when the handoff happens, we thought it was gonna be a little bit quicker. But when it comes to the accounts, it was taking about 6 weeks to switch it over. And I know that last year, as soon as we had the elections that night, Ian was emailing the minutes to her attorney, and the very next day, the attorney presented it to the Secretary of State. The one thing that is really awesome is that we have automated a lot of the processes. Like they used to do the taxes, they would do it manually and sent it in kind of snail mail. But now everything is done online. We're ready to rock and roll. And then just the FYI on that portion, right now the treasurer is the one who has that information. Well, I'm mistaken, excuse me. I think he handed it off to Drea because Drea is the one who's finding the tax accountant for us. And the tax accountant's gonna need that information, but it takes about 6 weeks. So I'm still gonna sign checks until the new chair can, but the transfer of the credit cards are gonna happen immediately. So hopefully the person has the very next day to be able to go in and transfer the information. Yeah, and I think that's all. Any comments about the usernames and passwords? Because I thought 2 people should definitely have that, like the secretary and the chair. But I also thought maybe like the vice chair, I believe he did have access to it, but never did anything with it. Go ahead, Janice.
Shouldn't the entire executive committee have those? Because, things happen, people are not available, and it's good if the entire executive committee, they're trusted community members. They're not going to do anything funky with it.
I believe the same. Yeah, I believe the same thing. I think when Claire and I started creating it, we did give Dan access. And I believe we asked Andrew, don't quote me on that. They might have all had access to that spreadsheet, but I know for sure that Claire and I did, because we were the ones like, oh, here's another one that just popped up. So every time something popped up, we would put it in there. But yeah, I personally don't see a problem sharing those things. One thing that I can say, I was really impressed with, because I've been throwing out, subscribe to our YouTube channel and things like that. And last month and the month before, we had 128% like rise. Now, that doesn't mean much. There was only 3 subscribers, but getting the word out there is pretty important. We are getting more and more people at least noticing on the social media side, but for me, it was really cumbersome. Because it's it's another platform that you can use, and I was kind of fumbling through those too, where you can do it on the Facebook side, but also the Instagram side. And the Instagram side, we got a lot of responses there too. Yeah, and that's all I have. Any other questions? Stop sharing, and then any of this information I could send out to you guys so you could take a look at it if you want to. I just kind of kept them open so we can all look at it together. We have gotten a couple of comments on our YouTube channel too, which I thought was kind of interesting, but I would also maybe consider if on the next board there is somebody who is savvy with that Instagram and the social media, you snag them up real quick and put them on that as soon as possible, because it did see I didn't utilize it like we should utilize it, and I feel like if we used it more, it would just really boost up more people getting involved. Any questions or anything else? All right, well, that was super fast. Thank you, guys. I want to, oh, Derek, I see you said, do you have a meeting with Joe on Monday for more specific information? If you need anything from me, please don't call me. No.
Oh, Dan, or I emailed to somebody, the last email I got from her, which was a list of just some questions. And I wanted to sit with her and ask line item each one of those more specific. So whenever I do come back here, I can at least answer them the best I can.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see that email if you haven't already sent it out.
I sent it,
And
but
I-
I think it just went to you. So can you help me?
Okay, let me look through my email stack. and see what-
The EFN one, I think.
Yeah, let me look for that.
And if you could shoot it back to the whole group here, that'd help, because I goofed up when I sent it.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay.
And Derek, I'm not sure. I know that they had like a Google Space, and I'm not very familiar with Google, so I kind of didn't do a deep dive in it, but I think that it would probably behoove either somebody who's a specialist in it to maybe help train who needs access to it and how to do it and things like that. Because that was the one thing that kind of got put on the back burner too, was like the training portion of it.
That's something I
But I
talked
don't
with
think
her.
anybody was, yeah.
That's what I
don't
talked with
think-
her about a little bit, was if she would be willing to have somebody in her office put in some time and effort to help us get kickstarted once we get moving again. And it sounded like she'd have no problem with assigning somebody to our account to help us for a while. And it didn't sound like that was going to cost us.
Okay. Well, it sounds great, people. Thank you so much for showing up today. I appreciate all of you, and see you on the 8th, which is the board meeting, the general meeting, and that's where I'm going to try to shoot out as many Facebook posts as I can and things like that, requesting for help for our elections, and see if we can get some more people involved, at least in, being at the elections. And I do plan on being at the mission, but I'm not sure if my anxiety will let me, but I'll try to work that out.
Well, we are having a
yeah,
board meeting.
I-
next month.
No board meeting. Yeah,
Wow.
it's just going to be, I'm sorry.
Why aren't we having a board meeting next month?
Um,
At this point, the last thing that was on my checklist was that charter. And I really just want to kind of focus on preparing for the general meeting so we can just hone down on what we're going to do during elections and then go from there. And
Well, wouldn't it be
honestly,
logical
me
to have a board meeting? and
personally, I don't have
if
time
we're
for,
gonna Plan for an election, wouldn't it be logical to have a board meeting in March to facilitate us planning the election? Wouldn't that make sense?
well, that is planning. The general meeting will be where we're doing the planning for it.
Why would we not, as a board, be doing that? At a board meeting in March?
Personally, I don't have time to call another meeting, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Oh,
to me,
okay.
yeah,
All right, well, I think, a lot
to
of board
me,
members,
it,
a lot of board members would
mm.
like to have a board meeting in March, so we may just proceed with that.
yeah. Yeah. And again, we're gonna be discussing it at the general meeting and see if we can go ahead and get some more people to come and help with the actual elections. I know that at the end of March, Claire, myself, and Andrew are going to have a quick meeting because there is going to be a kind of like test run the week prior to and anybody's welcome to join that. It's going to be via Zoom and then also on at the mission. So we're going to do a test run because I think last year the only thing we ran into was like emailing. People weren't getting the emails and it was going into like a trash bin or something like that. But Andrew was the one who's running that portion of it. And then I will be, Claire said she was going to be at the mission. And then I believe I'm going to be at the mission also, handing out the pens and stuff like that. The mission offered also just kind of a little FYI to, serve hors d'oeuvres and things like that. And last year they made a lot of food and nobody showed up. So I said water and coffee, and I feel like that should be enough. But because I didn't want them, wasting their food for the meeting. I feel like that was reasonable. But yeah, after the general meeting, then we'll have an executive meeting, make sure that we have our ducks in a row. So the handoff is really simple and like the passwords, how to, change the email addresses and all that good stuff is going to happen. And then the first week of April will be the test run, but I'll send an email for that too.
I gotta go. Good night, folks.
Have a great night. Thank you, everybody. Hold on, I stopped the recording. Are you sure you want to stop the recording? Yes.